Right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the first webinar in this webinar series, Learning from Connected Communities, hearing from nature-based climate solutions knowledgeable speakers across Atlantic Canada. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci pour votre participation aujourd'hui.
For everyone for your great participation today. It's our first webinar in this series of, it's called Learning from Connected Communities, Learning Nature-Based Solutions.
We have simultaneous interpretation available today. If you would like to listen to the event in English, please find the interpretation button on the bottom right of your screen and select English. And if you would like to hear everything today en français, s'il vous plaît, cliquez sur le bouton d'interprétation.
Please click on the interpretation button on the bottom part right and select French to listen to events in French. So we're starting today with two presentations, and we'll have time for questions and for discussion with the two speakers. So if you're using interpretation, if you're please speak French. If you're using French interpretation,
remember to speak in English. Avant de commencer avec les présentations.
Before starting with the presentations, I will start with a land acknowledgement. I am now residing on Mi'kmaq territory, but the New Brunswick Environmental Network works on the territories of the Mi'kmaq, Wolastoq, Yik, and Passamaquoddy peoples. And when we speak of climate change and how to respond to climate change, it's very important to do efforts in terms of reconciliation and decolonization as we work on climate change issues. So I will start by introducing our first speaker today, Julie. Julie is the executive director of Vision H2O for the watershed of Cap-Acadie. And now I will pass the floor to Julie. And please go ahead, Julie. Thank you, Lillian. Sorry, I'd forgotten. I was on mute. I'm just going to start. It always takes a few minutes. My computer's a bit slow. So you can see my presentation? Yes? Great. So thank you very much for the invitation. It's always great to speak about dunes. With the weather we've got today, we all love to be on those next to those dunes and at the beach. So as Leanne was saying, my name is Julie. I'm the executive director of Vision H2O. It's been now, 10 years? Since 2012. It's been quite a while. So we've been working since my early days in the group on this project. The presentation will really basically show the type of work, how it's changed over time, and how we collect our data and our outcomes in terms of the discussions that we've had with groups, and really how the project started and where we're at now. So before starting, as Lillian was saying, I work for the Cap-Acadie watershed group. Now it's now called Cap-Acadie. Before it was the village of Capelet and the rural community of Beaubassin Est. That's what the former name was. So there you see the map. It shows our territory, pretty large territory. The project it's a wide variety of projects. mostly based on water, first of all, protecting water. We do inventories of fish and species and protection of water courses and surveillance, monitoring. It's a lot of work in terms of restoration of the dunes, for example. We work on protection of certain species, pollinators, for example, swallows. There's a real great variety of works based on requests from people or projects that we've been doing for X number of years. But there was always an educational aspect. We're really strong on education for all of our projects. So I just wanted to start by speaking a bit of the background. Where does the dune protection and restoration and where it started and where the group started and how we came to be doing this? Just to give you a brief summary of how the project has evolved and changed, and then show the results that we have seen, the data that we've collected, and some of the outcomes from one year to the next. And after, it'll be just a little conclusion. So let's start. So we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. We were incorporated in 2003. We started in the 2000s, early 2000s. And like all of the watershed groups at the very start, they did an assessment. So what is located in the watershed? So the first years were very focused on water, but other projects came in. For example, the Dunes project. So the Dunes project really started at the Beaucoup beach. There was one section of the dunes that had a real hole in it, and the group was approached by the municipality to try to see what could be done. So that's where it started. It was a good site where you can work. It's a public site. So in terms of public awareness, it's great. You can put up signage, you can do presentations, and we had great collaboration from the start with the municipality in partnership. They managed the park. That was really great. We all started in 2005. Oh, it's nearly 20 years that we've been working on this project. So in terms of in technical terms, they wanted to have materials, natural materials. So we looked into what was available in terms of the cost. That was a major factor. As a group, nonprofit organization, we really focus hard on the budget. So one of the things that came to mind was Christmas trees. It's after it's done, it's not used. After they're done, sometimes you use it to make mulch, but we could use them for our project. So there was a major effort at the start to try to have the general public bring in their Christmas trees. We had a really wonderful partnership with the municipality, and they helped us to get the materials. So that was for about 5 or 6 years, and the work was pretty focused on that site, the Beaucoup beach. But after 2010, 2011 or so, we really wanted to expand it. So to change the project a bit, we had there was consultants with the commission, and we were interested in seeing what happened on the shore. What was the shore looking like for our watershed? It is a place, in fact, that's very developed, very highly sought after for tourism. It's a system that's very important for the region. So we want to I say characterization of the dunes, but it's really characterization of the shoreline. See what we would find there. And that research lasted 3 years, and it really gave us a good sense of what we were seeing. We saw that some sections had lovely beaches, others, it was a lot of armor rocking, and other parts, it was sea rock, like cliffs and capes. So we saw 3 different systems in our watershed. So after we continued our projects for restoration, but then we had interest in terms of Marram grass, dune grass, as you might say. That was in 2016. We did do a little bit of work at the start, but 2016, that's where we really started to do plantations of dune grass. And I'll speak to that a little bit later. So let's start by showing what we saw with the restoration works using Christmas trees, restoration of the dunes, what we had as outcomes. So I'll show you what we determined would be important for the site to see if the technique would work properly or less well based on observations, what we were able to see. So certainly in terms of seeing if the technique worked properly, well, in each slide, you'll see a before and after shot. You see here at the Beaucoup beach, it's a great site 1 year later, and you can barely see the Christmas trees. So sites have a lot of sand and have a lot of sand are so very important. Some sites we did where the beach was really thin, narrow, not much sand, and the technique doesn't work as well. So this is one thing that is required for it to work. We want to encourage the dune to be a nice gentle slope that would happen naturally, but as humans we always want to help. So we want to put the Christmas trees as close as possible to help to get that lovely gentle slope. So you can see to your left, it's the site on the Gagnon site. It took 2 years. We see and on the right in Capimet, the citizens of that region had done a project with snow fencing that had worked really well. So as you see in the second photo, that with the accumulation of sand, vegetation has been established. It works really well. One thing that I say as well is once you do this type of project, it's important to have it really put signage and indicate it's a project. And people said, "Oh, Christmas trees. We could make a lovely fire with that." No, but you have to advise people that it's a restoration project. We want to protect the ecosystem, and then why we want to do it. So public education is very important in these situations. So in terms of materials, we see with these hurricanes and large storms that we're having in the summer, in the fall as well, it's often that the sites can be completely destroyed. You've seen that with Fiona last year. So the usage of biodegradable materials that even if it's in the ecosystem in the sea, it won't bother things. Wood, cotton cord, things that will not be damaging. We try not to put in any plastic at all or anything like that. It's the same site, actually. No, sorry, this is in the Lobby Show. Two different sites, but if you give it time, it works. It really works. And in terms of developing partnerships, in terms of the community, this is so very important to not only educate people, but to get some help. When we put in the Christmas trees, it's pretty physical work, really. So if we get some help, it certainly is of a great help. And it allows for public education and to explain why we're doing that type of work. Why are there dead Christmas trees by the beach? Because people could maybe wonder about that. So here as well, we see in Beaucoup lots of sand. So the sand really settled in well. So in terms of restoring dune restoration with marram grass, dune grass, if you will. So certainly at the start, it was transplantation, and we're still doing that. Sometimes we'll go get our plants on the dunes where there's a real good vegetation presence. It's really healthy. We can find small bits of it using the technique on the guide that you see on the slide. Sometimes it's just places where we know that there's going to be lots of foot traffic. lots of foot traffic. So we want to minimize that loss of vegetation and bring it elsewhere. So just to ensure that if it's work that you want to do, to get the proper permissions from the owner, your permits, your Wawa permits, and to ensure that the technique used, that we don't remove more than we need. So usually we go with the rule of 10% per square foot. It's not a whole bunch. So in 2016, I mentioned that we changed the project a bit, that we added an activity. There was a community interest on Nicola Beach. They had approached us. They were interested in receiving marram grass. This is a plant that we find along the coast, along the shore. It's the expert plant. It's really great. If ever you don't have it, please, it's good to have some. It really accumulates sand. It's pretty handy to have that vegetation. You see from one year to the next, some places where I go visit with people, Julie, we lost everything. Fiona came in and just swept everything away. And I say, no, if you'll observe properly, you're going to see it's just the top part. It's just the leaves that are gone. The roots are still there. We'll see in the spring, and chances are it'll come back. And indeed, you go next year in the spring, you start to see young shoots. So that plant is essential for dunes.
Mais tu veux vraiment, vraiment emmener cette plante-là par la suite. Donc, on a développé un genre de protocole, c'est une recherche, consultation, discussion avec d'autres groupes pour voir comment avoir cette plante-là, parce que malheureusement, elle ne se trouve pas à beaucoup d'endroits. Puis beaucoup des endroits qui l'avaient ou qui... Non, je devrais dire qu'ils l'avaient, c'est discontinué. Là. Comme cette année, j'ai eu des appels au bureau que les gens ne peuvent pas en avoir. Puis malheureusement, suite à des grosses tempêtes comme Fiona, c'est là qu'on en veut. Donc, c'est quand même un sujet que j'essaie de travailler là-dessus pour rendre cette plante-là accessible. Mais pour le moment, donc, on utilise cette partie-là plus pour éducation. Donc, c'est moi-même qui va chercher les graines, qui les prépare, qui les fait pousser à la ferme. Puis là, par la suite, vous voyez nos deux jeunes là, au coin de la diapo. Donc, on fait des genres de sorties éducatives avec les jeunes pour expliquer un petit peu l'érosion, puis les dunes, l'importance de cet écosystème-là. Puis là, on les fait faire la plantation d'ammophiles pour faire une action envers la protection des dunes. Donc, ici, c'est un site qu'on avait fait avec les jeunes de la première année. Donc, c'est eux qui ont planté nos 950 ammophiles. On avait quand même beaucoup, beaucoup à planter, mais ça a quand même vraiment bien poussé. Donc, c'est ça. Avec l'ammophile, c'est vraiment un apprentissage annuel. C'est de ce qu'on a commencé en 2016, puis j'en apprends encore aujourd'hui. Mais c'est quand même important pour la communauté parce que vraiment la demande est là. Donc, les ressources, l'affichage, c'est vraiment essentiel pour expliquer l'importance de ce système-là, de ne pas marcher sur les dunes. Puis, on a développé aussi 2 protocoles. C'est juste un petit peu pour expliquer. Les gens nous posaient beaucoup la question, comment est-ce que je fais ça? Comment est-ce que je commence? Donc, c'est juste expliquer un petit peu, si vous voulez faire de la restauration avec les sapins, voici étape par étape quoi faire. Puis au niveau de l'ammophile aussi, si jamais ils veulent en faire planter, nous autres, avec nos ressources limitées, je veux dire, je ne peux pas fournir à tout le monde, mais je peux certainement expliquer, voir ce qu'ils ont besoin de faire. Ça, c'est souvent avec des consultations qu'on est capable de faire ça. Puis pour conclure, au niveau des dunes, au niveau de la plage, la zone côtière en général, c'est un environnement qui est assez dynamique. Donc, à chaque année, il ne faut pas perdre courage parce que des fois, ça peut être vraiment décourageant quand ça fait X nombre d'années que tu travailles sur une section, puis juste une tempête, tout est enlevé. Mais il faut vraiment se mettre dans la tête que c'est un milieu dynamique qui est toujours en changement. Donc, le travail qu'on fait, c'est continuel à chaque année. Les techniques qu'on utilise sont quand même pas coûteuses, c'est quoi que les gens peuvent faire. Puis on est toujours là pour répondre aux questions. quand on veut s'impliquer dans des projets comme ceci, la collaboration, l'éducation est super importante. Puis, ça nous démontre vraiment que, de ce que j'ai vu des dernières années, que nos plantes indigènes, exemple l'ammophiles, mais il y a d'autres plantes aussi. Il y a vraiment un grand besoin. Les gens nous approchent, ils veulent avoir ces plantes-là, puis c'est juste pas disponible. Puis j'espère qu'on peut avoir des discussions, continuer les discussions, voir ce qu'on peut faire pour essayer d'amener
To see,
ces plantes-là plus accessibles. Et c'est ça pour moi. Merci beaucoup.
so that's it for me. Thank you very much. Check, check. 1, 2, 3. The interpreter apologizes. He temporarily lost connection. Thank you very much, Julie. Any questions? For questions, I hope that at the end of the questions, we'll have a discussion. So keep your questions for the end. So the next presentation is by Marion. She's the Director of Research for Valores. So I'm going to pass the mic to Marion, and thank you. Thank you, Lily. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to present our work. I'll share my screen. Can anyone see my screen properly? Yes. Can everyone see my screen? Great. Thank you. So thank you to Nature NBN for inventoring in Climate Atlantic for doing this presentation. Julie's presentation was great. It's kind of along the same lines. My slides are in English, but I'll speak in French. So it'll help Anglophones as for those who are bilingual as well. So my presentation will be in 2 parts. The first one will be a summary of a case study that we did in Le Goulet in the northeast of the peninsula, Acadian Peninsula. And the second one, it's another case study on, it's a tool that we started in Valores. We want to see if it might work for retaining sediment. So I'll speak to you a little bit more after, in the second part of the presentation. So before going straight into the topic, I just want to talk to you about Valores. For those who don't know Valores, it's an institute, it's a research institute nonprofit that's located in Chipaga in the Canadian Peninsula. And we have different activities. We have one part that is purely service and an analysis lab in chemistry and microbiology. And there's a research section. I'm in charge of that section. I'm the director. We cover all the themes related to natural resources, fishery, aquaculture, soil, agriculture too. We really restore a lot of wetlands and peatlands once peat is removed. And we have a large part that's adapting to climate change for communities, but also for industrial sectors. So that's, in summary, that's us. That is Valores. It's about 50 people. If you want to know more about us, please ask. I'm just going to go on into the presentation now. So the work that we presented is work done in collaboration with the village of Le Goulet. And there were some predecessors before me who worked with Le Goulet on this project. So it's a bit of a summary of the whole project. Le Goulet, for those of you who have already been there, lovely beach, lovely dunes, but unfortunately it's a village that is really at high risk. Repeated storms since the year 2000 has led to erosion and major problems with flooding for that municipality. And then additionally, damage to infrastructure. So it became rather urgent and pretty crucial to help to bring about solutions to stabilize the dune, first of all, and to allow accumulation of sediment where the dune lies. there was work that had been done in terms of Le Goulet at the wharf level, etc. And one of the hypothesis was it could potentially sediments are being moved from the beach along the dune. It connected to zones that had been fortified by armor rock. So the work that was led by Valores, but in collaboration with the municipality, was to do follow-up of the dune and the beach based on different sectors that were characterized by, well, let's say different methods that we might compare. So earlier, Judy spoke of Christmas trees. Well, we had Christmas trees, recycled Christmas trees. We tested those as well. We tested old lobster traps that were no longer functional, non-functional for fishing. And we had two zones. We did beach nourishment, where we added in an artificial way sediment. And one part of it was unvegetalized, and the other part was with vegetation. So it's a structure that goes over about 2 kilometers. As you see on the map here, there's 4 sections. They don't necessarily operate the same way. The sector 4, for example, will show lots of erosion in relation to the others. The sector 2 that's showing weak erosion, and sector 1 and 3 that is showing accumulation. As Julie was saying, dunes and beaches are dynamic areas. It moves. It's not a static system. In the same season, between the springtime and the autumn, when we do monitoring, you can even observe a significant variation between accumulation and erosion. And we look at the final result, there's still variation through over the 2 kilometer stretch. These are a few photos quickly to show to you what it looks like, the Christmas trees and the lobster traps. So the lobster traps, the Christmas trees were mostly to retain sediment, and the lobster traps, the idea was to avoid ATVs, to block ATV access. We can't control everything. Sometimes they run over the dunes. Despite signage and information and education, Julie was saying it's so very important. You have to continue, because not everybody understands the importance of preserving the dunes. In terms of adding sediments, we have a photo here in 2014 and 2021 where we added sediment artificially. And for the vegetated zone, we added sand rye and American beach grass. It's such a champion. It's Marram grass. We see how the propagation of Marram grass has done really well to be able to stabilize the shore, the ridge, but to also retain it in place. The little graph up top shows that between 2014 and 2020. So we established the sediment in 2014, and since then, we've seen that this structure, the dune structure, the artificial dune structure, continues to stay in place. This is very interesting in terms of outcome. Now, in terms of without adding vegetation, unfortunately, what happened was Dorian came through it, and it destroyed the structure that had been put in place. We, with the municipality, tried to put it back together a few weeks after Dorian passed, but in conclusion, the lack of vegetation to stabilize it all, it does not certainly help to retain the sediment on place. Erosion happens slowly but surely. When there's a big storm, all the sediment, unfortunately, leaves with the storm into the water. In terms of follow-up, I won't go too much detail. We do a total station. It allows us to do follow-up monitoring of different concepts. There are about 17 on the beach along those 2 kilometers. We look at the volume of sand that accumulates. We also look at the topography from one point to the other. heading out towards the water. Has there been erosion, and has there been accumulation? That's what we study. If we look at the effectiveness of these sediment retention structures, we out of the 17 that had retention structures, only half showed an increase in volume on the beach dunes. And for the zones without sand retention structures, no Christmas trees, no lobster traps, no sandry, no marram grass. 3 were showing an increase in volume naturally, and 4 showed a decrease in volume. So that means erosion in the observed zones. So a few photos. This is a photo with the Christmas trees and the lobster traps that were placed in 2015. And we see to the left, this green color. It's really it's a good match for the countryside. We don't see exactly. See on the right, very few things have moved on that photo. This is a photo that shows before and after a zone where we didn't add any structures, no retention structures, and we do see that in terms of the vegetation, there's no particular damage, not that we can observe. So as a rapid conclusion, in terms of the follow-up on the Legula beach, the majority of transects we've seen accumulations of sediment, but the different retention structures for sediment that we established, that we compare, don't necessarily mean to like a sort of magic solution. If you think that it's all very site dependent, with some conditions, the impact of storms, the impact of wind as well. On the Canadian Peninsula, there's so much wind. It can have a play into the effectiveness of the structure. What we observed is that accumulation of structure is mostly happens in length, but not so much in height or across the dune. The other thing that I want to say, that the various elements could contribute to increasing the size of the dune generally, and the addition of marram grass or sandry, all those areas where we added marram grass were very successful in terms of stabilizing the dune and also accumulating. So accumulation of sediment on the dune and the proliferation of vegetation as well. So quickly, I will speak to the initiative in terms of the sphagnum role. So what's behind this idea? Well, in the peninsula, we have major erosion problems. And the right, you see a photo taken between 1944 and 2012. You lost 86 meters. This is sometimes more than 3 meters lost per year. So we said, we have to try to find a solution. We thought internally, we reflected on it. We're going to use a product we're calling a sphagnum roll. So why sphagnum? In other research projects, we use that fiber. Well, we would like to push is a bit strong. We want to encourage the peat moss industry to use sphagnum fabric in terms of perlite and to replace peat in total. It's a material that's very interesting. It's spongy. It aerates substrate well, and it retains water well. So we want to use those characteristics well to protect against erosion. So the fact that it's spongy, it can absorb the wave energy in terms of its water and rich content and water retention to allow rooting of plants. So we designed a roll that's 100% sphagnum. It's sphagnum that's found naturally in the local peat mosses of the peninsula. We rolled it into using jute fiber. It's biodegradable. And we planted sea lime grass on that roll. We placed it in a zone that was not very exposed for our first trial. It was on Lamec Island in the dunes that were rather sandy. And on that site, we did monitoring in terms of how plants were proliferating, accumulation of sediment, and biodegradability of the sphagnum roll. So it looks like this. The sphagnum roll looks like this on day one. We did our first trial in August 2020, right in the pandemic. We were very motivated. So we see the results 2 years later in 2022. What you can see is that the structure that was put in place in 2020, it really blends into what was in place. It's really hard to establish where the roll was initially placed. We did notice that the sphagnum inside was still humid, sometimes humid, so could continue to nourish in terms of water the plants that were in place. That is very interesting. We didn't do any follow-ups in the winter because we can't access the site. So the first preliminary results that we saw in terms of the original plants, there was not much left, but new plants appeared. This makes us think that there's hope, you might say, in terms of having plants proliferate. So we'll seek to pursue our observations. It wasn't just sea lime grass that grew. There was like also marram grass that grew, and salicorn. And in terms of accretion, here's where we placed the sphagnum roll. That's green, and there was a control site where there was no sphagnum roll, and that's in gray. You see that the sand accumulated. The accumulation of sand is much more significant in zones where we placed the sphagnum roll. This is another result in terms of height of the beach. It's similar to the previous result. The zones where we placed the sphagnum roll, we had more accumulation of sediment than the control zones where we did not put any. So for the follow-up, this is only for one site. So we'd like to deploy this experiment across several sites on the Canadian Peninsula, but we're of course open to deploying it elsewhere than the Canadian Peninsula to see how effective this new tool might be. So in conclusion, it's a really easy tool to establish. It demonstrated that it allowed for accumulate and also plant support is confirmed. The thing that would remain to do in terms of cost assessment and to continue to in situ monitoring and to deploy it elsewhere than on that site. One thing I didn't put in the slide is that after Fiona, unfortunately, our role disappeared. We know roughly the strength of storm that might make it go away, but we don't lose hope. We're thinking of how to optimize our technique when we install our roles. I don't work on my own. There's a whole big team. This is the team that I work with, and it'd be a great pleasure to answer your questions. I hope I didn't go on too long. Sorry if I went beyond the time a little. But that's it for me, for my presentation. Thank you. Thank you to you all. It was not too long, Marion. It's perfect. Thank you. So, yes, now we're into the question and answer period and discussion period. So for those participants, you can lift your hand in Zoom or write questions in the chat. And also Julie and Marion, if you have questions for one for the other, you can ask each other questions as well. So yes, we're just waiting for questions from the people, the participants.
If you have any questions, you're welcome to raise your hand on Zoom and I'll call on you and you can unmute and ask the question, or you can write it in the chat.
Moi, j'avais juste une question peut-être à propos.
I had a question to ask to the participants and to everyone. I just want to see there are people who are seeking certain plants who have worked, if they're landowners, if they've done work, restoration work. I mentioned marram grass, for example. It's so hard to acquire. So if there are people who have sources of marram grass that if they might share them, or they might want to share about works that they've done. I'm just curious about what might be going on. And I'd like to add, and Valores, I'd like to see if it's a type of project that you've already worked on. Well, not necessarily marram grass precisely, but I know you were speaking of agriculture. Are there certain plants that you've worked with before to try to propagate those plants? That was one of my questions. Yes. At Valores, we have a greenhouse where we can propagate different types of plants. So it can be, well, we've already done it for blueberries, black spruce, for bushes and grasses. We haven't done it for marram grass and lime grass. Okay, we have a supplier in Quebec. You probably know him. As you were saying, it's really hard to acquire, and certainly we're interested in. I can see that with the photo that you've presented that you're already doing it, but let's say to develop and perfect that technical skill to be able to serve the population and the projects that we do. So yes, I am interested. We have the skills to do it. We have the human resources to do it. It's not something that we're doing just yet, but we are certainly interested in doing it. In New Brunswick, I don't think there's anybody offering that service in nurseries or in greenhouses where you can acquire it. It's a plant that is so very useful. It's a champion in terms of retaining sediment in dunes. It's an unavoidable step over the months and years to come to have an institution or a place where we can get some so we can shave our shoreline. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Mario. It was a long answer. I hope it's a good answer to your question. Well, that's what I was hoping. That's what I was hoping would be your answer.
We have a couple of questions in the chat.
Yes.
The first one I think is from Mariel. Do the disused lobster traps release any contamination into the environment when used in the dunes, such as paint pieces or chemicals?
Can you translate, please, Lily?
Sorry, I wasn't sure whether you were on the French channel or not. Wait, je ne sais pas le mot pour lobster trap, désolé, mais est-ce que les lobster traps que vous utilisez?
The lobster traps being used to restore the dune, to avoid that used to avoid destruction of dunes. Would these lobster traps cause contamination or problems with the environment, given the chemicals? I think I've got it basically. So if adding those lobster traps would lead to pollution on site, I will admit that I don't have the answer. Probably yes, probably no, maybe no. I don't know though. The initiative for the lobster traps was done much ahead of my time. It was a citizen initiative actually as well. You have to understand that sometimes it happens different places. You can find communities and populations that are really in disarray. All right, what do we do? What solution can I bring to save myself? As you might say. From that, all sorts of initiatives comes out, and I won't say I'm not against the lobster traps necessarily, but the study to check if there was a chemical pollution impact as the metal decomposes was not done. It was, should we do it? Yes, probably. But I don't have any data. I don't have any tangible results to say it was placed and it had no effect, no chemical effect, or it did have some. I can't answer that question. But initially, why? Well, they placed Christmas trees, but they also placed the lobster traps. It's because of the four-wheelers, the ATVs. I think at the start, there was the Christmas trees, only Christmas trees. And unfortunately, people continued to drive on the dunes, and it was damaging the dune. To have lobster traps, it's harder to go over them. So it was to dissuade travel, basically, to discourage travel. If we speak of nature-based solutions, as everyone is talking about, we would promote and certainly promote Christmas trees. But as I was presenting the Goulet, I couldn't just skip that part and say, I know we're talking about nature-based solutions, but in the Goulet there's various methods, and I think it's important to show them and to compare them. But the Christmas tree method, it's conclusive. It's not just in Le Goulet that you can use it. I could show you other examples. There's other examples in the peninsula. And the community level, people speak to each other. Well, I'll collect them. I'll drop them off at such a place for such and such a dune. It's lots of citizen participation. It's really wonderful. That part is so great. Unfortunately, cannot answer a specific answer in terms of pollution due to lobster traps in the sediments in the dunes. But it's certainly a study that would be interesting to know in what measure it might have an impact. Thank you. We have another question, another comment from Mario in the chat. In some of the figures, you see that the dune it doesn't look in terms of height. It's not moving inland, but you see that the height of the beach is lower in front of the artificial beach. Is it the same? Is this how you read the results? Yes, we see the same thing. I would confirm that. That's exactly it. We've had annual reports for each of the years that we've been monitoring that I could share if you'd like. This is why the conclusion is, in conclusion, I was saying the methods are not conclusive yet. They're not all conclusive yet in terms of Le Goulet, whichever method that we observed. In the same season, there was accumulation and retention. Well, retention of sediment, also erosion. There's sectors where there's much more erosion. There's zones where we put in retention structures and nothing is going on. There's areas where we put nothing, but we see natural accumulation. So I think that there's still, we have to identify what the parameters, what are the parameters that lead to this type of result. We have to work on this. There's still work to be done. Stefan has an answer. With the rise of the sea that we were foreseeing over the next upcoming century, moving the dunes would be desirable, right? Well, I won't. Probably yes. If it increases in height and it moves slightly inland, why not? But I'll let Julie finish up on that point. Yes, it's desirable. Can we do it though? That's the problem. We see that in some areas, in some of the watershed, whereas there's coastal quays, where the dune can't, we have one site in particular where we see that the dune cannot necessarily migrate and it's gone. There's no more dune. It's just a sand hill and it's causing a major risk. If there's another big storm, it'll just remove that section entirely. It's a pretty large area, like distance from the dune. That'll cause other problems for the dune because all the systems are interconnected. So if you move 100 meters of a dune, it will have an impact on the whole system. So it would be preferable, but as I was saying in the presentation, lots of development here in those sections. We also observe certain measures taken to try to protect property, and then the dunes disappear, the beach disappears. This is something that we observe that is causing an issue because it changes the system entirely. And it has an impact on the whole of the system. Thank you, Julie and Marion. Are there other questions for Julie or Marion, or one or the other, or both? Yes, hello. Yes, please go ahead. Yes, may I ask a question? Okay. I just have to introduce something here. My name is Xavier. I'm a student at Mount Allison University, Southeast New Brunswick. At this time, I'm part of a research project.
We are assessing the flood preparedness in the province. Alors, we're trying to figure out what kind of things that the province and groups, municipalities are doing to mitigate the efforts of climate change and more specifically flooding. So I suppose I had a few notes here. I've been taking notes the entire discussion. I think it's a great initiative that both parties have got going there. I think not only for biodiversity preservation, but also for human assets that are further out back from the dunes. I think it's a great initiative to preserve and to strengthen the dunes, especially in the context of flooding. I suppose my role with this project is to figure out what the community is doing and what kind of initiatives are in place in order to mitigate flooding. So I was thinking that, like you guys talked about all kinds of best practices that you have put in place, like comme les sapins et les trappes à homard.
Christmas trees and lobster traps and all that. So I would potentially like to have access to the PowerPoints that you put up with all of your results. And along with that, our goal is to create a peer-reviewed article. Sorry for flipping between French and English. The goal is to create a peer-reviewed article by the end of the summer, where we could send it to different people. I would potentially like to get the emails of Marion and Julie, if I could, and if possible, have a way to contact you to discuss this type of thing. I see there's lots of parallels between the work that myself and our group are doing and the work that you're doing over there in northeastern New Brunswick. No problem, Xavier. In terms of getting the presentation, Lily shared our emails. You can send us an email to discuss, to have further discussions. Sorry, I'm a bit nervous speaking in front of people. No worries. Good job. Thank you very much. Thanks for the information. Are there any groups with initiatives, the same type of initiatives? This is a really lovely initiative to have a meeting like this with people who are interested. Are there initiatives that you're doing to discuss this type of thing? Mario, I don't know if you want to. Well, I was going to throw it over to Lily.
We have a project on natural solution, so she can probably send you some results she had. But your project is focused on flooding, just flooding, or nature-based solution?
It's flood preparedness. So just
Okay.
how municipalities and communities, individuals as well, how people are preparing for flooding, especially with the rise of sea level and the increased dangers that increased flooding presents, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And your project is focused on New Brunswick?
It's in the province, yeah.
Okay.
We originally started in Sackville, New Brunswick, and had an in-depth research analysis of the area more on an individual scale. So how people are preparing to their homes against floods. But now we are expanding a little bit more to see what in the province, what things are being done on a municipal level and on a governmental level. And as well on the individual level. So with all these findings, we are going to tabulate a paper by the end of this summer is the goal.
You should probably contact the Association of Municipalities, Francophone municipalities. I think they probably have a team working on this kind of subject. I'm not sure of that, but you can try to contact them. For your
Yeah.
theory, excuse Lily.
Also, I just put my contact info in the chat as well. We're the project that this webinar is a part of. There's more information on our website, nbn.ca, but we are connected with l'Association Francophone des Municipalités, as well as the Union of Municipalities in New Brunswick, and our work is directly connected with supporting municipalities with nature-based solutions. So there's definitely, I think I have a lot of resources I could share, and we could chat. We are getting to the end of the time for the webinar today. So definitely, Xavier, reach out to Julie, Marion, and myself, and we can share some more resources and chat more about the great work that it sounds like you're doing.
Right, I definitely will. I definitely appreciate the opportunity that you guys have presented here for us. Yeah, up to you.
Great, and merci beaucoup, Julie et Marion.
Thank you, Julie and Marion, for your presentations. It was wonderful. And as I said, this webinar is part of a series of webinars that we're doing over the month of June and in the start of July as well. There'll be 6 other webinars on the other types of nature-based climate solutions. I sent the link for more information on this series. It's in the chat. The next one is 7th of June, next week, on rain gardens. So I hope that you will be there. And thank you very much for your participation today. Thank you, Lily, and thank you to the Environmental Network, and thanks to all the participants. And thank you to everyone. Thank you, Lily. Thank you very much. Have a great day. See you next. See you soon.